at this point.
That is true.
Like,
That is
and they
very
but
play
that's not really that much of a
completely
problem.
differently.
When someone says mech, I just think like a lot of tanks and Hellions is the base of it, right? Like like if you say mech, I think traditional mech. It's tank, Hellbat, Hellion focused. There might be some Banshees or some Liberators or some Thors or some Cyclones mixed in, but it's fundamentally tanks and Hellbats, right, as the core unit. So if someone's talking about mass Cyclone or mass Speed Banshee off 2 starports, like that is very different, right? Same thing if someone goes 3 Battle Cruiser Battle Mech, like what Maynard just did, that's Battle Mech, like that's the Battle Cruiser Battle Mech, which is a real specific style. So that's a good point, feardragon. Very different responses usually.
So what messes me up when I play Battle Mech is early roach attacks. So right at the start, like a very early roach attack. So obviously it's very all in, but if it works, then I'm dead. So you have that going for you. You don't have to play a long mech game. If you're okay playing the longer game, I think that I honestly like a lot of Ling Bane is actually really good. And just don't worry about the BCs. Like just keep making queens. Make like 6 to 8 queens. Keep your queen count at like 6 to 8. Even if you lose queens, remember to replenish them. And just make a lot of Ling Bane, double Evo Chamber, expand a lot, and force me to go out of Battle Mech into something else. And if I'm still Battle Meching, Infestors. Infestors actually fucking ruin that comp. And also the added benefit of later game, you can neural BCs if I still have those.
I was gonna say that, like, I mean, you can say that people are going bio, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're only doing one type of thing.
Yeah.
I totally know what you mean on that regard, but I feel like the style of bio, the different variations of bio, have enough in common, like not in terms of like the units and stuff, but like they have enough in common in terms of how they play and how they feel and how you play against them. Compared
to like
more
of a drastic
Battle Mech, for
difference,
example. Yeah, Battle Mech is like in your face all the time.
Yeah,
and then
it should be.
Traditional mech,
I guess I'm
traditional mech
confused,
is like
so
the opposite.
You brought it up and it sounded like it was like a we need to fix this thing, but I did miss the context. So, what's your point? We shouldn't say mech
we're
anymore?
just trying to give advice because a player asked about it, but
okay.
It's just when someone asks like, "Oh, can you help me with mech?" And it's kind of like to me, I feel like a lot of people just say mech.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do you mean by that? I wish that as a community, the thing that I wish that we fixed is that
people should just be more specific with their questions.
I feel like
people are just like, oh, how do I beat carriers? And it's like, if you want to learn in StarCraft, put the effort into watching the replay and going, oh, my opponent did a 2-base push of 40 SCVs. They hit me with 6 tanks, 8 Hellbats at 7 minutes 32. If you go through, it's not hard to check that, but if you do that, there's so much more context there, and there's so much more understanding of like what the problem actually is. So it's more just an overall problem with people being vague and being lazy and not putting the work into defining or even researching what they even died to. Like there's a lot of people, like when you lose a game, what you think happened is very rarely what actually happened. And if you don't put in the work to rewind and double check and consolidate and slowly move your game sense forward and go, oh, this is what happened. This is what I didn't take into account while the game was happening, and that's why my understanding was flawed. If you never do that process, you end up stuck in a rut of being like, wow, Terran, or just blindly copying whatever the meta pro build is, right? So you've got to define things more, and it's kind of like in general, if you put effort into actually figuring out what the problem is, you're actually going to get a lot of help. Whereas, you know, we all get bombarded with questions constantly where it's like, Void Rays, and there's no context. There's a 1-base proxy Void Ray with shield batteries. Like, what's going on exactly? And 90% of the time, the player is just a little bit tilted after a rough game and hasn't kind of built that habit of actually checking the replay.
Agreed.
Yeah, actually, it's very, very common for people to concentrate on that one disruptor hit that killed their army as the reason they lost, and it's like sometimes that's not the reason. Like maybe it's because you were floating thousands of resources and had nowhere near the production you needed, and maybe you could have made that disruptor nova not matter in the slightest by having 60 more army supply behind that.
We were kind of talking about this actually when I was on your podcast, ZombieGrub, where we're talking about like caster advice and how, because we're all kind of sensitive and stuff, it's hard to give each other advice. But I think we had a good little chat about how, like, wait, if someone has actually already put in a lot of work, just clearly trying to improve and identifying some of their problems, and then they ask you really specific questions, like none of us would hesitate to give each other advice if someone's like, oh, at this point in a broadcast, I struggle with knowing what to do. when production's telling you to throw to a break, but you're halfway through a thing, blah, blah, you know, like if there's a specific question, we'd easily give each other advice. But if someone, and what all the new casters do is they're like, oh, what could I do better? And it's just like this really vague thing. You can't really give advice there because, you know, you don't want to just be like, like what do you focus on as the other person? So I think it's the same with any advice anyone's looking for. If they put a bit of work into like self-analysis, they get like way better feedback.
Yeah. We were having a conversation.
Caster calls, ZombieGrub's podcast. Who was the most recent guest?
Nate. No,
Nate.
Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I have Hodgins coming out this week, this Wednesday.
Cool.
Fuck yeah.
I did one with Seltzer that's coming out soon.
Oh,
2 weeks,
cool.
and then I did one with Artosis.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, Artosis is really good.
I mean, Salsa's done so many events at this point. She's a old school pro.
She's very wholesome. She's very easy to talk to.
Yeah.
I've only ever, I mean, I've spoken to her in person and stuff. Actually, the first time I met her was in Katowice, strangely enough. Because back in 2015, she was like there working for a YouTube channel, doing interviews and stuff for esports. But go on, feardragon.
Yeah.
She's become like one of the iconic hosts for gaming, like not just esports, but like for gaming. She's become one of the iconic hosts.
Yeah.
ACG, spend your money. Spend your money, spend your money, spend your money. Backseat. Five factories.
I'm so tired.
Wow.
I don't wanna.
Just make a command center.
Make 2 command centers.
No, I already spent. I don't have 2 command centers.
I already spent. I don't have it. Oh god, give me time to recharge.
Oh, apparently, I like this one. So chat just dropped some knowledge, and I really like everyone in chat to take part in the discussion. We always read out the most interesting ones. Chris Rock's advice, kind of in the same line. If your car breaks down, you just wait for someone to help you. Nobody will stop. But if you start pushing your car, lots of people will pull over and help you. Help yourself first.
That whole philosophy is so true in just a bunch of places in life. Like that happens everywhere. It actually happens a lot in content creation as well, where like people ask you, "Oh, how do I get into casting or something?" And you're like, "Well, I mean, that's you just go cast."
Yeah,
like,
start casting.
Get started. And then once you have something and you start running into actual problems, like then you start saying, "Oh, well, like I'm struggling with this part when my co-caster's doing this, like I don't know how to respond." Like then you can start asking specific questions. But if you don't get started yourself, all you have is the vague concept of like, "Oh, I want help because help is good."
Yeah. But it's actually, there's like an art to finding mentors as well. Because there's like, a lot of people have this idea that you can't just get free advice, especially from people who are very established in a field. But you can. You just need to inspire them. You need to make them see a little bit of a reflection of themselves.
I find it really ironic that someone called Fear is paying you out for being annoying.
Someone going fast battle cruisers.
Oh.
This Terran's name is Fear, and he just said, "Are you always this annoying to ZG in game?"
Wasn't that the name of that movie with like Reese Witherspoon and Mark Wahlberg being a creepy guy? Was that called Fear? He's like a bit of a psycho.
I'm not an active Mark Wahlberg movie watcher. I'm gonna be real with you.
Right.
I don't think he's an incredible actor. I think he was incredible in precisely one movie, and that movie was The Departed.
Well, he was actually really good as a psychopath in this movie. I really liked
really?
that.
Okay.
Like he did, yeah. Because too often he's like meant to be the wholesome good guy, but I think Marky Mark actually does a bit of a psychopath a bit better. Yeah.
He was a bit of a psychopath in The Departed, but he was like a funny Irish one. So like,
We live in a society where being a psychopath can be being a good psychopath can be celebrated.
Yeah. Well, look at that Joker movie. That's like all it is, right?
Yeah.
pretty much. But I don't know if it was being celebrated. I don't know if people
Oh,
were sitting there going,
Chad move.
Oh yeah.
Jesus.
Oh my god. ZombieGrub says get F. Drop a mule, drop a mule. Please drop a mule.
Yeah,
Yes,
meal.
we did. Oh my god! This is for quicker if you're using the tank next to held up. Oh.
You can just tell that CG side, she's just rallying in stuff. It's like, I'll win eventually, right?
Yeah.
More that's on tanks.
Friendly
Why
fire
not?
the tank.
That was really cool. I never even like I looked at that situation. I was like, wait, she's going in. I was like, I would never think to go in there, but you're like, yeah, I could just park these on top of these tanks and start killing everything. I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually sick. Oh, that command center mag failed it.
Swag field, swag field, swag field,
maybe not.
swag, swag, swag. Oh.
Thank you, Brave Tyro. Appreciate the sub. Oh yeah, back on that mech question, just in case anyone wants simple strategic advice. I'm a Roach Hydra Viper fan, so if anyone plays against mech a lot, Roach Hydra Viper is the closest thing to a one-size-fits-all solution to any mech composition because it works versus everything. But since most Zerg players have the spellcaster usage of a 6-year-old trying to use a jackhammer, you probably need to kind of develop your ability to use spells as part of making that work.
When do you abduct and when do you blinding cloud?
You always
have, like, a
abduct.
formula?
You never blinding cloud until you're an
Never
expert at abducting. You never blinding cloud. That's my like technique. Is you simplify it because everyone chokes under pressure and they're like, ugh, and they just like spam both spells at once. But if you just become an expert at abduct first and use that as your primary one, because that's the most like reliable spell you can just like pick off units with always. Like it applies to every situation. Then you get really good at that, and then like once you're really sick at that, you learn what the right time.
Yeah.
Why even bother?
Wow.
Why even bother? I just wanted to get in my
Queen.
base and make battle cruisers, and you attacked me, ZombieGrub. Fuck
I
you.
don't know.
Posts 8 hours of StarCraft, logs on and mechs some guy in the mouth so hard that he whinges about it. Yes, Queen.
That was sick.
Oh
All
my
right, Pig,
God.
you're up. God, I'm such your fan, ZombieGrub. If I wasn't a fan before, I'd be a fan right now today. If I wasn't already a fan.
Beautifully done.
Delanar, the Blackthorn himself.
Hot diddly damn.